For whenever you're ready.
Put it in my bag.
You ready?
My
Whenever you're
bag,
ready.
I thought it was-
Okay, I'm ready.
It's gone.
All right, let's get this meeting going. Oh, yeah. All right, let's get going for the planning commission meeting for 10 September. Erica, could you please do a roll call? We'll let people know how to get in touch with us and pass on staff present.
Sure.
Thank you.
I'll start with the roll call. We have Chair Bluth,
Here.
Vice Chair Silva,
Here.
Commissioner Brassfield,
Present.
Commissioner Dawson.
Here.
Commissioner Fletcher.
Here.
Commissioner Freeman.
Here.
And Commissioner Latassa.
Here.
Great. And the staff members present, we have our planning manager, Levi Hill. We have our senior associate planner, Christy Sabdo. We have our housing manager, Anastasia Wyatt. We have our HCD coordinator, Jacob Varania, and we have myself, recording secretary, Eric Cabrera. And while I'm at it, I can go ahead and let the public know how to participate online via Zoom, which is information on participating in this meeting and providing public comment, including remotely by Zoom or telephone. It's on this meeting's agenda, which is online at isearchmonterey.org. Remote commenters will be muted until it's their turn to speak, and a timer will be shown on the screen. If you're connected on Zoom, the timer is accurate with no delay. In the chamber, we recommend keeping phones and devices muted to prevent audio interference with the meeting. Thank you for participating in your city government.
Thank you, Erica.
You're welcome.
Let's see, consent agenda. It looks like we only have the minutes from August 13th and August 12th field trip. Does anybody have any comments on those?
There are a couple of typos. I'll just pass them on to Eric.
Okay. Anybody in the audience that has any comments on the consent agenda items? Anybody online?
There are no hands raised online.
Okay,
Move to accept as asked by Commissioner Freeman.
okay. So you're seconding, Sandra, or are you making the motion?
Making a motion.
Make a motion. Anybody seconding?
Second.
Great. Can you please do a roll call, Erica? I mean, a vote.
Sure. Chair Bluth,
Aye.
Vice Chair Silva,
Aye.
Commissioner Brassfield,
Yes.
Commissioner Dawson,
Yes.
Commissioner Fletcher.
Abstain.
Okay, and Commissioner Freeman
Yes.
and Commissioner Latassa.
Yes.
Okay, those minutes have been approved.
Does anybody in the audience have any comments they'd like to make on items that are not on our agenda? Anybody online, Erica?
There are no hands raised.
Great, I guess we can close that. So why don't we go to the public hearing? First is recommend to the city council that the capital improvement program project list for 2024-25 fiscal year as amended with the 30 Fisherman's Wharf project is consistent with the city's general plan, area plan, master plan, specific plans, coastal plans, traffic calming plans, and Monterey multimodal plan, and supersedes planning commission resolution 24010. I guess, Chris, you have a staff report for us?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Bluth and Commissioners. This is Christy Sabdo, Senior Associate Planner with the City of Monterey. I'll be presenting the amendment to the 5-year CIP project. It's fiscal year 2024-25 project list with the addition of 30 Fisherman's Wharf project. As background, on May 14th, 2024, the Planning Commission reviewed the proposed CIP list and determined it was consistent with the subject plans. The amendment being proposed to the CIP list is 30 Fisherman's Wharf. As background, Wharf 1 features a main boardwalk, various concession buildings, finger piers, and docking and mooring structures with both city-owned and tenant-owned structures. The city implements a structural maintenance program to inspect and assess the condition of its 2 wharves to identify maintenance and repair needs. The vacant building at Fisherman's Wharf, 30 Fisherman's Wharf, which is concession 33, came under city ownership in 2021. There was an inspection and assessment of Fisherman's Wharf that was performed in spring of 2024. And for this project, 30 Fisherman's Wharf, it was found that there are needed repairs, which include replacing damaged deck boards, floor finishes and sheathing, and installation of structural hardware and framing. So just kind of general maintenance for 30 Fisherman's Wharf. The city anticipates construction in late 2024. So adding this project to the 5-year CIP program, we found 30 Fisherman's Wharf consistent with the general plan and subject area plans. And you can see Exhibit A, what the consistency analysis. Let me know if you have any questions. Also, this project would be, it was found to be exempt as an existing project. So repairs to existing project 15301. Therefore, staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution recommending to the City Council that the 5-year CIP program for fiscal year 2024-2025, as amended with 30 Fisherman's Wharf project, is consistent with the general plan and subject area plans and the Move Monterey multimodal plan. We have various staff here. If you have any questions on the 30 Fisherman's Wharf project.
Which one is concession 33?
Well, it's 30 Fisherman's Wharf. I'm going to ask Jana to come up, please. Thank you.
Let me turn this on now. Good afternoon, commissioners. My name is Jana Aldretti. I'm the city's leasing and property manager and manage the city's commercial portfolio. And this building is currently vacant, was formerly occupied by Scales Seafood and Steakhouse.
By who?
Scales,
Oh, Scales, okay.
Yes.
Gotcha.
anything else?
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Any other questions? Okay.
There's no further questions. We can open it up for public comment.
Sure. Yeah. Anybody in the public have any comment on this item? Nope. Should we move to a motion?
There are also, there are no hands raised online.
Oh, yeah. All right. Do we have a motion for it?
I'll move that we recommend approval for the amended CIP project list.
Second,
Great. Erica, could you do a roll call for us?
Sure. Chair Bluth,
Aye.
Vice Chair Silva.
Aye.
Commissioner Brassfield, Commissioner Dawson,
yes.
Commissioner Fletcher,
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes.
and Commissioner Latassa.
Yes.
That motion carries.
Okay, next coming up, consider 1040 Roosevelt Street variance application. BA 240010 to allow construction of a 2-car garage and a reduced frontage yard setback, reduces side yard setback, reduces building separation, and a building height exceeding a 12-foot maximum at the existing single family.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I have been told I have to recuse. I'm within distance of the my property is within 1,000 feet of the subject property. So thanks.
So we'll get Terry called back in once we're finished with this item. Fernanda, I guess you'll be doing a presentation on this one.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, there it is. Okay. Okay. Hello, Planning Commission. My name is Fernanda Roveri, Principal Planner for the City of Monterey. And like Mr. Chair Bluth said, I'll be presenting 1040 Roosevelt Street, a variance application. Staff's recommendation is that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution approving the variance application. 1040 Roosevelt Street is a 5,600 square foot lot in Old Town neighborhood. There is an existing 2-story house and detached carport with an underfloor storage area. The zoning is R16 and the general plan land use is low density residential. You can see in the image the subject site and the existing single family dwelling. The carport is covered with trees. The existing carport structure is non-conforming in that it is set back 6 feet 5.5 inches from the front property line, and a 20-foot minimum is required by today's current zoning ordinance. It is set back 4 feet from the east side property line, and the 5-foot minimum is required. And it is 16.9 feet tall, and a 12-foot maximum is allowed for residential accessory structures that are detached. Roosevelt Street is roughly 10 feet higher than the front entrance of the existing house. And this is the reason for the variance application. This is a topographic map submitted by the applicant. And you can see that the elevation benchmark on the street is 258 feet. And then on the right side, next to the wood steps that lead to the entrance of the house, there's a marker for 248 feet. And so that's about a 10-foot difference between the top of the street and the entrance of the house. The site slopes down toward the house. There's an existing concrete driveway approach. And then the existing carport is, like I said, 6 feet 5.5 inches from the front property line here. This is an image of existing versus proposed. So the applicant is proposing a 2-car garage in the place of the existing carport. The applicant would also like to have that underfloor storage area that is currently existing under the carport. So on the left side is a site plan of the carport. It's a 1-car carport. And on the right side is the proposed 2-car garage. In order to fit 2 cars, the garage would extend toward the west of the property and into a already disturbed area. The front setback would remain at 6 feet 5.5 inches. Same with the side setback, 4 feet. And however, the carport, the 2-car garage would be expanded toward the house in order to have a 20-foot deep garage. And so the distance between the garage and the house would be 7 feet 4 inches. So this would get smaller. And these are images of the existing elevation, the north and south elevations of the carport. So you can see the carport structure on the top and then the underfloor storage area on the bottom. And the south is the view from Roosevelt Street. So this is the current view. On the right side is the north elevation of the proposed 2-car garage. The north elevation is the faces toward the front of the house. And the south elevation is what you would see from Roosevelt Street. On the bottom here is a photo that I took of the story poles facing Roosevelt Street. These are elevations of the east and west existing. So this is viewed from 1030 Roosevelt, the neighbor. So there's a door going into the underfloor storage area. And on the west side, that's the entrance to the house from the carport. On the right side is the proposed 2-car garage with underfloor storage area. So the east view is from the neighbor at 1030 Roosevelt. The west view is again showing that the other side. Okay. That's weird. So this is the image that I took from the neighbor, 1030 Roosevelt, and it shows kind of, it aligns with the east building elevation so that you can see the increased height that is shown by the orange netting. The findings that need to be made to approve a variance are that because of special circumstances or conditions applicable to the subject property, strict application of the requirements of this ordinance deprives such property of privileges enjoyed by other properties in the vicinity and under identical zoning classification. And staff found that the circumstances that apply to 1040 Roosevelt are special and unique to the subject's property because the topography poses a challenge to development of the site and overly constrains the site's building envelope when development standards are strictly applied. The grade slopes down from Roosevelt Street toward the back of the lot about roughly 10 feet, like I mentioned, and vehicular access to the site is severely limited because of this big slope. The garage, the current zoning ordinance requires 2 parking spaces for single-family homes, and the applicant would like the ability to park 2 cars. And so this is why the garage is being proposed. So going from a 1-car carport to a 2-car garage to accommodate a second parking space. And unfortunately, the slope of the lot is so great that there is really no place for to have parking behind the required front yard setback of 20 feet. So this is why the applicant is applying for a front yard variance as well. And the second finding is that granting the application will not be detrimental or injurious to the property or improvements in the vicinity. And the 2-car garage and storage structure would be, for the most part, constructed in the same footprint as the existing carport. It would maintain the non-conforming front and side yard setbacks. It would be constructed closer to the existing single-family dwelling. But this was found to not be detrimental to property or improvements in the vicinity with application of building code requirements. The garage would be taller than the carport, but it is designed to look like a 1-story garage from Roosevelt Street, and no impacts were identified. And the third finding is that granting the application is consistent with the purposes of this ordinance and will not constitute a grant of special privilege. So granting the variance request would be consistent with the purpose of the zoning ordinance, and that the garage would not decrease the quality of the Old Town neighborhood. It would look like a 1-story structure from Roosevelt Street. It would not be a grant of special privilege because granting the variance would allow the homeowners the ability to have enclosed parking and meet the parking requirements. The storage underneath would not have an impact to the neighborhood. It would be sort of tucked in under that slope area. And the proposal would not exceed lot coverage and floor area maximums. In the time that I was putting this presentation together, there was a public comment uploaded to the submitted comments website from the neighbor at 1030 Roosevelt Street. And the neighbor wanted the height of the proposed garage to be reduced. And the neighbor will probably speak, but he submitted drawings of a hipped roof on the garage instead of a shed roof. Proposing that the hipped roof would lower the height of the of the garage. And I think the planning commission's role today is to set a maximum height that you are willing to, that you're, if you are going to approve a variance, setting a maximum height variance, I think would be appropriate because this project would need to get architectural review approval. So in the architectural review process is where design elements like the type of roof shape would be discussed. But I guess the planning commission's role is to set the height limit. And with that, staff is recommending that the planning commission adopt a resolution approving the variance application. I'm available for questions. I believe the applicant is here, yes.
Thanks, Fernanda. Any questions for Fernanda?
Just one question. So because the height is a critical factor, and I know it's in the report, but I haven't got it memorized. The height of the present carport versus the new proposed height, what is that difference?
The difference is the existing carport is 16.9 feet measured from to top of roof to grade below. And the proposal is 23 feet. And I don't remember the number of inches, but it's 23 feet. So it's about a 7-foot difference.
It's 23 feet and 11 inches, so close to 24 feet.
So Fernanda, since ARC is going to be looking at the architectural component, the roof type, either way, either roof that is chosen would be the same height at the peak, wouldn't it?
So the shed roof, the tallest point of that roof would be 23 feet, 11 inches. And if, let's say the planning commission sets a different height limit, then the applicant would have to modify the roof to meet that height limit, whether it's a shed roof or a hipped roof or a gable roof.
I have some questions. Fernanda, thank you for your staff report. Could you go back to the slide that showed the north-south elevations, please? So I'm looking at the north and the south, and the roof line at the peak does not line up. The north looks considerably taller than the peak at the south, and I'm curious as to why that might be.
Can you repeat that, please?
Well, if you look at these two images, the image of the north, the peak of the roof, looking at the north side, is significantly taller than the peak of the roof at the south side. Shouldn't they be the same peak?
So of the existing,
No, of the
Oh.
proposed.
so the north view is seen from the house. Like if you stood in front of the house facing. So I guess this is, if you're standing between the proposed garage and the existing house, this is the view that you would see. And on the south side is viewed from Roosevelt Street.
But
Fernanda, it doesn't appear as though those images are aligned. If you look at the finished floor of the garage, on the south, it looks like it's sitting lower than on the north. And that might explain that proportional difference in the roof height.
Yeah,
see.
I believe this is a merging of two separate drawings, so I think they're just not
They
lined
didn't
up.
line up.
They're not lined up,
Well, that's
correct?
unfortunate. Okay. Fernanda, is there any, when somebody is applying for a height variance, is there any limitation to how high they could go?
No, they can request any height.
So conceivably, this could end up being a 40-foot high roof peak with a variance.
Sorry, the commission would be placing, with the approval of the variance, you would be approving either as proposed, which would be setting a cap on it at the 23 feet, 11 inches, or a more restrictive height if the commission felt that was more appropriate. But there would be a firm cap placed on it based on the decision of this commission.
Question. If we, have a firm height from the planning commission, does that give the architectural review board the leeway they need they might want it to come down? Or does that guarantee, well, planning commission gave us 16 feet, we want at least 16 feet?
The
Where's that?
ARC would have the authority to approve a lesser height based on the findings they have to make surrounding the design of the project.
I wouldn't want anything we would suggest to get in the way of them doing the job that they're assigned to do.
And they bless you for that.
Fernanda, could you go back to the east-west elevation of the proposed?
Okay, east-west.
And I
Huh.
just want to get,
Okay.
for the benefit of other commissioners and myself, the methodology for determining building height. Is it averaging the natural grade? Is it taking the, maybe you can explain how that works.
Sure. So the way that our city code defines building height is you would take at any point at the top of the roof, you would shoot a line going directly to the grade below. And that line can be no more than 25 feet.
I see.
That's for a house, but then for accessory structures that are detached, that maximum is 12 feet.
So if you look at the image on the screen, the proposed east elevation, that dimension of that highest point pretty much illustrates exactly what Fernanda described, is just that plumb vertical distance from the highest point to the grade
And
directly beneath it.
is there a way to determine the height for a modification to this, which would result in like this hip roof version that you referred to? In other words, if we were to consider this hip roof version, what would be the height of that particular alternative?
I mean, the design of a hipped roof could vary greatly, so I couldn't say what number.
Well, let's
Mm.
take a look at the east elevation, and if we were to take the midpoint of that shed as the peak of the hip, then perhaps that would be a base point for us to establish a building height if we wanted to move in that direction. Is there a way for us to determine what that number might be?
I could calculate it, but
Because we're being
Yeah.
put in a position of actually establishing a finite number, but we're working with information that's not providing us with enough to establish what that number might be.
Mhm.
And that's what I'm trying to get here.
Okay, so I don't know what these eve projections are, but the garage is proposed to be roughly 20 feet deep. And it's a 2 and 12 roof pitch. So, at, yeah, at 10 feet, 2 and 12, that's 20 inches. That's a 20-inch, at the midpoint, it would be a 20-inch, 20-inch elevation. 20 inches above plate line.
Okay, so then it would also be 20 inches below the design peak, which is what we're looking at. So that number,
Mm-hmm.
Fernanda, do you have the cross section and the plans that you could possibly share?
I could go to the staff report, the agenda packet. Do we
So
have it pulled?
I'm viewing the cross section right now, and on the lower side, it has a ceiling plate height of 8 feet 1 inch. And then on the upper end, on the higher end, it has a ceiling plate height of 11 feet 8 inches. So with that, you could, I won't do any averaging in front of everyone, but you could probably do that math and get your halfway point. And while those calculations are being done, I just want to echo what Ms. Riveri said earlier
Okay.
as far as the role of the planning commission. So
Yeah.
I think part of what the decision has to be made here is whether or not the findings for the variance can be made. And then, of course, before straying too far into impacts to views or privacy or adjacent properties, those are findings that are spoken specifically in the architectural review findings. So just want that to be in consideration as well. And of course, I want to also remind that we are still in the staff questioning period, which we are, as all the questions have been appropriate, but we still have the applicant available who might be able to shed some light on this as well.
Right.
So we could find for the variance on all counts, including the height, and it still would go to ARC to determine finally what they think the height should be.
Correct. They have a separate set of findings that they would be making at that time.
So I did the math and the difference between 11.67 and 8 is 3.67 divided by 2 is 1.8 is 20 inches. So it's right exactly where you said.
23. Very good. Any other questions? Yes, Mike.
On the 4-foot side issue, how far on the other side of the fence is a structure?
I can look at the,
Is there any close by?
see.
According to you're behind you, it says no, but one of the issues that keeps coming up is that people object to a variance on side because it then puts the building too close to the neighbor's residence. If that's not an issue, that resolves that one question. The second question goes to what is the approach angle from the street to this carport existing?
The angle of,
Well, it's down below the roadway, right? What is the angle? Because, and then how much space between the edge of the carport and the roadway? Is there enough room to park a car?
well, the edge of,
And would it be the same for 2 cars if the variance passed?
so I can tell you that the edge of the carport to the property line is 6 feet, 5.5 inches. But I don't know the distance from the edge of the carport to the road, like,
17 feet, 9.5 inches. It's right here on.
Oh,
both the
okay.
drawings. There's
Yeah,
enough-
the driveway.
So, and a typical parking place in a yard is about 20 feet, so.
Well,
That's why I asked,
Yeah.
because and also going back in history, was there a variance on the existing carport?
I could not find a variance.
That's why I asked, I wanted to confirm. Because this is a very unusual topographic anomaly. Trying to put a parking space in a garage with that big of an angle. Is that why the height of the existing carport was higher than normal? Because of an angle of approach? That frequently is accommodated by increasing the front edge, because if if your car is at an angle when it goes into the garage and then levels out, you could pick up the top edge on your roof. That's why.
Yeah.
But do we have that kind of a situation here?
So I think what you're describing is on that street side of the structure, is it being elevated to allow to maneuver that? The upper end of the structure is actually on the interior side.
Yeah.
So it'd be, so no, that's not, it
Yeah,
doesn't
but
appear that's what's
why
happening.
On the approaching side,
Yeah, on the entry side of the structure, the cross section shows it at 8 feet 1 inches. And then on the interior side is where you have it increasing in height. So as you move forward deeper into the lot, the height of the structure is increasing.
and the existing height of the carport is what?
16 feet.
No, 16.9 feet. That's the tallest point.
So that would again be that most extreme on the interior side measured down.
Thank you, and welcome back.
Any other questions for Fernanda? Okay, would the applicant like to make a presentation?
Hi, I'm Bill Mefford. I'm the architect for the owners of the Aikens. And just, so basically, the existing carport, when the owners pull their car in answer to your question, they go up the slight rise from the street, and then they go down, and they always scrape the bottom of their car, which is the reason why we're wanting to raise the floor level of the garage from what the level of the house is. Not the house, the existing carport, excuse me. We are 17.9 feet from the edge of street, which, yes, a 20-foot is a standard parking space. A compact space is 17 feet typically. So there is space to park cars in front of the garage. A standard car is between 15 and 16 feet long. Anyway, as far as that goes, as far as the slope of the roof goes, the current carport has a flat roof, and they have trees that drop all sorts of leaves and everything else on them that piles up, and that's why they would like to have a sloped roof. We chose the shed roof style because that's the style that is on the house. And that's what ultimately led to the 23-foot, 11-inch height. Yeah, and so the storage underneath, is just, we're going to be digging for the foundation of the garage and stuff, which just leaves that space. So that's why we're asking for that as well. But it does have a ceiling height that's less than 7 feet, so it's not counted as floor area. It can't really be used as a livable space either. And if you have any other questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, any questions for Bill?
Yeah, you mentioned you were lifting up the finished floor of the carport because there was a problem with a car or the truck hitting.
The car, the bottoming out on the because you go up from the street and then you go back down and it bottoms out on that.
Okay.
So that's why we're raising it.
Do you know what percentage grade your driveway is currently?
I don't have that on the top of my head.
The standard for driveway probably would be 12.5 to 15%. And I was just wondering if it was beyond those parameters.
Well, so what typically you do for, yes, driveways can be that steep, but typically what you do is when you have a slope up, you have an intermediate slope before you get to that steeper slope. And we don't have that.
Okay.
And we don't have the length for doing that either. Because usually that length is about 8 feet, 8 to
All
9
that
feet.
makes for your case.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Bill? Yes, Mike.
On the approach and at the other side of the garage,
Mhm.
you're going to stay within the code as far as the height goes?
Yes.
Okay. And I asked that question because, as you know, as soon as you get done, someone can file another application for an ADU.
Oh,
And then we're going to have these issues come up again. That's why I asked the question. But as far as this goes, are you going to have to make a sweeping approach to go into it, or is it straight into the garage?
it's straight into the garage for the one side. The other side has a slight angle to get into it. Because the existing width, I forget what, I don't have it in front of me, but the driveway currently is wider than a standard one car width.
And when the cars are parked on that approach,
Uh-huh.
are they aimed down?
Very slightly with our new, basically, we're going down maybe 2 or 3 inches is all from that peak, as opposed to, I think we're probably close to 2 feet down as it is now.
And will there be enough room on that approach to park 2 cars?
Yes, there will be.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Bill.
Mhm.
Maybe we can move to public comment. Anybody in the chambers have a comment to make? Eric, anybody online?
No, I'll just mention that information on this meeting's agenda and how to participate is online at isearchmonterey.org. There are 2 attendees online, however, there are no hands raised.
Okay, then let's pull it back. Any discussion on the variance for this project?
I would be in support of the way it's submitted and then let the architecture review board do their job with from the height and the ultimate form, shape and whatnot.
Mhm.
I would agree with that. I think that this is a wonderful idea to enclose the carport. And the fact that there's enough room left, park a car going in from the street, 17 feet, 9.5 inches, without it hanging into the street is, that's really a good thing. And I agree completely with Dan. To support the project as presented and then let ARC deal with the height issue.
Including the findings. Including the findings?
Yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
that's-
Here.
I actually have a difference of opinion on this one. I do believe that the height is pushing the limits, if you were for a variance, and that a reasonable outcome would be to suggest that the applicant explore this kind of hip roof or gable roof in which the peak would be in the middle and not at the end. And you can shave 20 inches off of the massing that way. I'm not convinced that by looking at the elevation from the street, it appears as a one-story building because of the extent of the sloped roof. It's most one-story buildings don't have a roof that goes back as far and as high. So I'm not convinced by that. And I do believe that this is going to have an adverse impact on the neighbor, especially given the fact that there was a concern raised in one of the letters. So I'm not in support of the height variance, but I will support the exceptions to the other portions of this variance.
Mhm. Any other comments, Mike?
In what Peter just said, what is the pitch of the house behind it? Is it the same? That'll be fine.
We'll need to reopen the public
Sure.
hearing.
Go ahead.
Bill Mefford again. The pitch of the house behind is 4 and 12. We went to 2 and 12 with this, so we didn't get, otherwise it would be huge.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Um, my,
We can just close the public hearing, please.
Yeah. We'll close the public comment back to Mike.
the idea that a property owner can try to be consistent with the style of a roof and roof lines. I think the house typically, the property typically looks better. I understand because I've lived with flat carports before where I had to go up on the carport to remove debris. The idea of a slope is helpful. And a little cue on the difference here of what planning commission would do versus architectural review.
Sure. So the 2 decision bodies have different purviews as it relates to this project and also different findings that they have to make in order to approve the project. And as Ms. Rivera laid out earlier in her presentation, the findings for this commission for a variance, special circumstance, whether or not it's injurious to an adjacent property or a nearby property in the vicinity, and so on, and or whether or not it's a grant of special privilege. Whereas the ARC has different findings, and I can even provide a little. So they have findings that are more in line with design-oriented findings and how that design impacts adjacent properties. So a finding for architectural review is that the proposed siding form, mass, and architectural style are appropriate for the project site, the immediate area, and the city. So I think that speaks to kind of what you're describing and compatibility with the existing structure and adjacent structures and how successful the project is. The other finding is that the proposed project will not unreasonably impair the views, privacy, or living environment currently enjoyed by other properties in the vicinity. I think that finding specifically touches on the other issue that has been brought up at this and as it relates to this project. So you're looking at this project, this commission's looking at this project from the lens of, is there something unique about the circumstances that's being presented, whether it be the property's shape, size, topography, and whether or not those circumstances have led to this some sort of hardship being applied to this property, and whether or not relief from the standards as strictly applied is warranted in this situation because of that hardship. And then the Architectural Review Committee will be tasked with deciding whether or not the project has been appropriately designed to meet those other findings that I just referenced and how it affects the adjacent properties and how compatible it is with existing structures in the vicinity.
So Levi, our limit on adjudicating this would be only to establish that there has been findings of site constraints, basically, and nothing else. And nothing related to the massing or the height.
That would be correct.
Okay.
And then where I'd say there is some gray area there is the word, in one of the findings, there is the word injurious to an adjacent property or a property in the nearby vicinity. And that is within the Planning Commission's findings they have to make for a variance today. So I think it's threading that needle between injurious and I think the word you used earlier was adversely impacting, and whether or not that adversely impacting would fall into the purview of the Architectural Review Committee versus whether or not injurious would fall into this.
Is there a difference in the definitions?
I can take a look, but I'm gonna say no, but I'm happy to take a look. No definition for either.
So it's up to us to.
Well, my final comment on that is this is an unusual because it's below the grade of the street. If it was above the grade of the street, then a higher roof would impact the visual as well as other issues. But being below I don't see it as a problem. And that's just my thought.
I visited the property today. It clearly is on a pretty substantial slope. And I'm assuming that when we look at the variance issue, there's going to be a height increase one way or another, depending on whatever roof type comes forward. And I think Bill and the applicant know this is an issue at this stage, and it's going to come up at ARC certainly. So it gives staff and the owner and the architect a chance to at least be ready for it. So I would think I would be supportive of the variance, given that regardless of what we do here, ARC is going to be able to come up with their decision on the roof type with what we've approved with the variance. So I think we're all in agreement to that extent, aren't we? I think.
Well,
Or is
we
it still-
received written testimony from a neighbor basically saying this is injurious
Mhm.
to our property. I mean,
Well, they were.
how do you?
They said they had a different concept for the roof, which would mass it less. So the height at the pinnacle of the roof would be the same, if not maybe a little bit. Let's just say it's the same height as the other roof, maybe less. And so there's going to be a roof increase height anyhow, which would be consistent with what the neighbor is saying, because the neighbor had a solution that he recommended.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting that in the comment letter that was received, it was acknowledged that even a different roof style would still require a variance.
Mhm.
So I think to Commissioner Silva, your point, your question, you're not questioning whether or not a variance is warranted, but to what degree a variance is warranted.
Well, when you had mentioned that one of the findings is to ensure that it's not injurious to what adjacent properties, that's one of the findings. And all I'm saying is that we received a comment that disputed this.
Mhm. Yeah, and I'll read the specific wording of the finding is that the granting of the application will not be detrimental or injurious to property or improvements in the vicinity or the development site or to public health, safety, or general welfare.
Let's see.
So one choice is to make a motion to approve the variance. Another one is to make a motion to approve the variance with the exception of the height.
With the exception of the height, which would result in them having to adhere to the allowed height of an accessory structure, which would be 12 feet, which would be less than the existing structure. The other alternative is you could approve a variance to the height, but not 23 feet, 11 inches. The other option is that you can approve it as proposed, and then the project would be further refined through the architectural review process.
I would like to make a motion to that effect.
I'll
I'll
second.
second that. Okay. Go ahead.
Can we
Second.
discuss?
Wait, can we, yeah, can I make a suggestion? Maybe what we could do is, do a motion from, Peter first.
Well, wait a minute, there's a
Wait.
motion.
No, there's a motion on the table
On the
and a
table.
second, so it's up for discussion.
Well, why,
And a vote.
yeah, why don't we vote on it? Erica, could you do a roll call for the motion that, just had?
Sure.
You
Chair
wanna
Blue-
repeat the mo-
Sure. So I believe the motion is to
Grant the variance.
grant the variance as proposed.
Yes.
With the findings.
Correct.
Chair Bluth,
Aye.
Vice Chair Silva,
No,
Commissioner Brassfield,
Aye.
Commissioner Dawson.
Yes.
Commissioner Fletcher.
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman.
Yes.
And Commissioner Latassa has recused himself. So it looks like that motion carries. The decision is appealable to the city council within 10 days. We have applications online or in our planning office.
Can we get Terry?
I think Kim is getting it.
Oh, okay.
And there is some like. That's why I don't see it as, I don't see an initiative. To me, if they had an approach. Depending on the severity of that was the only issue.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Couldn't have streets. That's just not.
Okay, let's move on to the next agenda item. Consider fiscal year 2023-2024 consolidated annual performance and evaluation report and authorized submission to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. And are we ready for a staff report?
Yes. Good afternoon, planning commissioners. My name is Jacob Rania. I am the HCD coordinator for the City of Monterey's Housing Division. Thank you for having me here today. I will be presenting on the CDBG Consolidated Annual Performance Evaluation Report, also known as the CAPER, for fiscal year 23-24. So the CAPER is a summary of the year's program funding, reports the city's progress in meeting community development block grant housing and community development goals. It's due to HUD on September 28th of this year, 2024. As far as the draft CAPER notice, the notice was made available and published to the following newspapers: the Monterey Herald, and the Monterey County Weekly. It was also made available to the public at the following locations. As far as annual funding, the amounts that we received through the program year in CDBG entitlement grants and program income are listed above. Received a total of 238,999 in CDBG entitlement grants, and for program income, we received a total of 451,541.07. Above, we have a chart that breaks down each of the activities that were funded this year for fiscal year 23-24. And those include public service grants, home repair grants, rehabilitation for our purchase and resale program, our public infrastructure grants, and our planning and administration costs. Listed above, we have each of the public service activities and agencies for this fiscal year. There was an amount of 172,000 that was funded for this fiscal year, or this past fiscal year, and a total of 1,980 people were assisted from low to moderate income. We also had public service grants through the CARES Act, and we had expenses in the amount of 100,000, and those were through our two subrecipients through Meals on Wheels of the Monterey County and Food Bank of Monterey County, and totaled 664 people that were assisted in low to moderate income. Next, we have our home repair grants. We were able to assist up to 5 low-income homeowners through our Mr. Fix-It grant, our home and safety grants, and our home accessibility grants. And for our purchase and resale rehabilitations, we had 3 affordable ownership units that were rehabilitated. For purchase and resale, the city did purchase 2 affordable housing units for rehabilitation and sale. And for this past fiscal year, we had our public infrastructure grants that totaled at 100,000. And these were improvements made by our Public Works Department and completed improvements to Laguna Grande Park. This included the installation and repairs of streetlights in the park, creation of a 4-foot wide concrete walkway around the volleyball court, repaving of picnic areas at the park. And we estimated that the improvements benefited approximately 3,144 people total in the census tract 53 block groups 3 and 4, and around 1,686 low to moderate residents in the city. For planning administration, we met timely use of funds tests, monitored subrecipient grantees, and managed management of our units over at Casa de Estrella, and monitored deed restricted units within the city. And our recommendation is that the Planning Commission adopts a resolution recommending that the City Council adopts the fiscal year 23-24 CAPER and authorize submission to HUD. Our presentation is now concluded, and if you have any questions, I'm here to respond.
I have a question.
Thanks. Go ahead, Dan.
Could you go back to your first image? It was the pie chart.
Yeah.
It's a distinction. Maybe I'd like you to clarify for me. On the administrative, you said administrative grants, or is that portion of the pie, the administrative cost of this program?
Portion of the pie.
And it's not, is it in a form of a grant to the city, or is it, how does that work?
Thank you, Commissioner Fletcher. That is our planning and administration costs for the past fiscal year.
Okay, thank you.
Mike?
Do you have any graphs that show from year to year how we're doing?
I don't, thank you. Yeah, thank you for your question, Commissioner Brassfield. Yeah, we do not currently, but I can turn that question over to Housing Manager Anastasia for any further clarification.
What I'm looking for, is there a performance matrix of any kind? Year to year?
Commissioner, there's no performance matrix from year to year. We evaluate everything that we've done for the current year through the CAPER, and it's based on how much funding we've received, which can vary from year to year.
I fully understand that it's based on the amount of money, but that's an easier to put into a matrix to show that we're doing better or worse. That's why I'm asking. If it's all based on money, then we can just adjust that performance measure. But how do we know we're doing better or worse? That's my question.
HUD evaluates us on an annual basis, whether we've spent our funds or not. So that timeliness test that Jacob Varanya mentioned earlier is how HUD really checks our test. Plus, we're evaluated in an annual audit. So the audit really sees, I mean, we could be receiving, I've looked at the past, 1.4 million in program income some years. This past year, we received quite a bit less. So your variance in amount of program income really changes how much you can do through the program due to that. So of course, we want to serve, we look at our subrecipients and determine, have we served as many subrecipients with the same amount of funds? Do we increase how many people we serve in the community? Those are the types of things we look at when we evaluate all of our subrecipients.
I appreciate what you're doing. I really do. But in one of the projects, Laguna Grande, you outlined, it talks about the number of residents that participate in that park. I happen to know there's an awful lot of people from other places go to that park. So I don't see that counted. When an NCIP did that soccer field, that drastically increased the number of people that attended that park. But I don't see that we're covering it as Monterey residents versus outside participants. And I think these kind of programs are necessary for a city, don't get me wrong. But I just hope that we have some way of putting a measure on it that we can show to the people that we're doing better or worse in civic programs. And that's what I was outlining to see if we can measure it. It would be helpful to the people that live there. Thank you.
You know, jumping on Mike's question, talk about the fact that there was $450,000 in program income 23-24, but only a year prior there was 900,000. That's twice the amount in the prior year.
That's correct.
How do those? That's a lot.
So one of the things this is dependent on is we have a series of deed restricted units that the city of Monterey imposed deed restrictions on for affordable housing. And that could have been an inclusionary housing requirement or some other way that these units were deed restricted. How we purchase the units is based typically, people stay in the homes their entire lives until they pass away, or they're moving into convalescent care. So that number of units that we're either purchasing on a year varies. It tends to be out of our total collection 2 to 3 units. Sometimes it can be a little bit higher, sometimes it's a little bit lower. We then work with our legal division with the heirs and whether or not they have a will and an estate, and we work to acquire that unit, we rehabilitate it and we sell it. So our program income is oftentimes dependent on this fluctuation, what's happening with our current tenants. And so it does vary. I would say roughly we get 2 to 3 units a year.
Thanks, Kim.
Yes.
Thank you for your report. The purchasing of units, does that go into the calculation for the housing element? Is that like a credit in that case?
So those are existing units. So so it would not count towards as an additional unit. If I believe you were speaking to the RENA obligations.
yeah.
Yeah. These are existing units that are being purchased and resold through the housing program.
Okay,
So no.
so the fact that we bought 2 new units this year, they're going to be sold, so it doesn't.
They were already deed restricted affordable. So they don't
Okay.
change in affordability levels.
Thanks. Yep.
Peter?
I have no questions.
Thank you. I guess anybody in the audience have a comment? Erica, is there anybody online with a hand raised?
There are a few participants online, but there are no hands raised.
Okay, thanks. Well, why don't we get a motion going? Anybody want to do that?
I'll make a motion, we accept staff recommendation.
I'll second.
Great. Erica, could you do a roll call for us, please? Aye.
Sorry, Chair Bluth,
Aye.
Vice Chair Silva,
Aye.
Commissioner Brassfield, Commissioner Dawson,
Yes.
Commissioner Fletcher,
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes.
and Commissioner Latassa.
Yes.
Okay, that motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Next item, consider amendment to the downtown specific plan eliminating minimum parking requirements for residential land use. Levi, you're going to do a presentation?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Pull it up right now. Okay, thank you, Chair Bluth. As the chair mentioned, the next item on the agenda for this evening is the amendment to the downtown specific plan, specifically to eliminate minimum parking requirements for residential land uses. And the staff recommendation is that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution recommending that the City Council amend the downtown specific plan to eliminate minimum parking requirements for residential land uses within the downtown specific plan area. So a little bit of background, as I think everyone here is well aware that the housing element was considered and adopted by the City Council on July 16th of this year. And part of that document was analyzing constraints to residential development throughout the city and did a very in-depth analysis to all those, both what's called governmental and non-governmental constraints. And through that analysis, it identified that minimum parking requirements are a significant contributor to development costs and are seen as a barrier to housing. Excerpt from a study that was included in the housing element is quoted here as recent analysis found that the cost of providing only 1 parking space per unit increases moderate priced housing cost approximately 12%, and 2 parking spaces can increase lower priced housing costs by 25%. So as a part of the housing element that was adopted in July by the City Council included the Housing Action Plan. And within that Housing Action Plan was a series of programs and policies aimed at making changes, targeted changes to city code sections and specific plan areas to remove those barriers to housing. And one of those programs was Program 2E, which was to revise the parking requirements. And it was specifically aimed at removing the minimum parking requirements in areas that were adequately served by public transportation. And then it is also aimed at ensuring our continued compliance with Assembly Bill 2097, which we'll talk about right now. So Assembly Bill 2097 was enacted in January of 2023. Generally, it prohibits public agencies from imposing minimum parking requirements for projects that are located within a half mile of a major transit stop. And a major transit stop is more thoroughly defined in that law, and then some other acts of legislation as well. But essentially, a major transit stop requires that it has fixed route bus service with service intervals that are no longer than 15 minutes during peak commute hours. So this slide shows the city's section of the downtown city transit map. And as you see there, located centrally in the city's downtown is the Transit Plaza at Seminole Plaza. And as we all know, transit service in the city of Monterey is provided by MST, which is Monterey Salinas Transit. And they operate all of our transit service throughout the city and the region. And they adjust service intervals and routes dependent on ridership demand. And so with that, the city doesn't actually maintain any control over service intervals for the bus lines that run through the city of Monterey, which can make it a little bit challenging for the city to assess the eligibility for the city's transit stop and how it meets the requirements of a major transit stop, as we talked about on the slide before, which dictates the city's eligibility for AB 2097 and whether or not minimum parking requirements can be applied. So currently, the downtown specific plan establishes the minimum parking standards for properties within the plan area. And residential projects are required to provide 0.5 spaces per unit. And the projects are also required to unbundle parking, which creates a separate optional charge for those who want a parking space. So as you can see, with a 0.5 space per unit ratio, not every unit would have a parking space. So therefore, developers are required to allow an option for tenants to essentially rent a unit without paying for the associated parking space. And then also parking requirements are able to be met with an in lieu fee or shared parking agreements between different uses. So the proposed amendment, and this slide shows the full extent of the downtown specific plan area. And the proposed amendment is a text change to the to standard S.262, and it would eliminate the 0.5 space minimum requirement for residential uses, would maintain the maximum 2 space per unit, which prevents from over parking, and would make clear that there is no minimum parking requirement for residential land uses. So this amendment would ensure consistent application of parking requirements by removing the dependency of our AB 2097 eligibility on the service intervals that MST operates. So essentially, this would allow for staff, planning staff, and even this commission when reviewing projects for whether or not they meet the minimum parking standards. This would prevent a situation in which that actually may change over time and inconsistent standards are being applied to projects over time based on service intervals that are outside the control of the city. And of course, as we spoke about earlier in our housing element, it further reduces the constraints to housing by providing that enhanced flexibility in design for developers when using reuse, when looking at reuse projects, and also removing a significant financial burden to developers for new construction projects. And of course, it's consistent with the objectives and policies of the 6th cycle housing element. The staff recommendation is to adopt a resolution recommending that the City Council amend the downtown specific plan to eliminate the minimum parking requirements for residential land uses. That completes the presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
I have a question. So you relieve the developer of the responsibility of providing parking because we're in this situation around all these transit stops and whatnot. Is there anything that's being done with our current design requirements for providing or making sure space is provided for bicycle parking, or now everybody rides an e-bike where someone could plug in their e-bike? I mean, we're taking away one thing, but we're creating the use of other things. That are we providing for them in design standards or, whatever?
No, it's a great question. And I'll have to take a look if our bike parking requirements are built out of a ratio of the required Automobile parking, which I've seen before. I can't recall how our bike parking requirement is structured off the top of my head. But I can look into that before we leave.
Thank you.
Of course.
Levi, I want to try to get a better handle on this whole relationship with the state law that you referred to. Are we looking at doing this to the downtown specific plan because the transit center is located there?
That's correct. Because it is seen as the highest served area of the city from public transportation and is also considered one of the highest resource areas and for pedestrian and bicycle.
And so the
facilities.
definition of a major transit stop would align with the transit center downtown?
Well, it specifically requires those bus service intervals at 15 minutes. So I'll go back to ours is kind of an interesting situation. So this shows our downtown transit map, and you see the Jazz A and B lines actually does operate at 15-minute service intervals. So that would meet that definition based on that. What's interesting is the specific language of the law actually requires the intersection of a 15-minute service interval line. And as you see here, the way our transit plaza is laid out, there's no actual intersection. It is effectively the same route. So it adds a little bit of a complication as well when you're applying the strict definition of that state law and how that fits our specific scenario here. But to answer your question, I would say it meets that 15-minute service interval burden. However, that can change over time. If ridership demand decreases in Monterey for whatever reason, that could go, MST has the ability to change that to 20 or 30 minutes. And we have no real say in that matter. And then that would then impose a completely different set of regulations on whatever the next development that comes in is.
Is that the reason why the city is not looking at the North Fremont plan and the Lighthouse plan? Because you feel like this is a stronger case long-term?
Exactly. There's no significant transit plaza or transit stop in the North Fremont or Lighthouse area that is comparable to the transit plaza that's in
Right.
downtown at Seminole
Okay.
Plaza.
Thank you, Levi.
You're welcome.
Mike?
On that 2097, when they pass the law, typically there are elements. Is the 15-minute an element to specify, or is it allow flexibility?
It's very strictly defined. It's a 50 intersection of 15-minute service interval, bus line, ferry terminal, and then I can't recall the other third option, but it didn't apply to the city.
If we don't meet those elements, is there a hammer the state holds?
No, the city has the ability to take a more lenient approach. If this transit plaza strictly met those requirements, the city absolutely cannot mandate parking in those situations. We're kind of in this situation where we want to kind of remove that ambiguity and just clearly define that whether or not parking is required in this area based on its proximity to the transit stop or not.
And it's just the transit stop, not any other stops ancillary to that route.
This specific amendment targets only the downtown specific plan area. So parking requirements would remain as they are today in other areas of the city.
Thank you.
Thanks, Levi. Just a couple of questions. So what is the approval process for this amendment? Is it, it goes to us, then it goes to one hearing at city council?
That's correct. Specific plans are amended by resolution or can be amended by resolution. So if it would receive a favorable recommendation and move forward to city council, they would consider it at their next meeting and would adopt a resolution to amend the specific plan.
Okay. And then let's say you had an existing apartment building with existing parking within this area, and they met the requirements or they had the ability to add more units on a given property. And if they were to just turn if they were to turn existing parking spaces into new units, that could happen.
That's correct.
And I mean, there are other rules, of course, of zoning rules.
I would say the caveat to that is in the coastal zone. So
Yeah.
removal of existing parking in the coastal zone is kind of a different conversation and has other agencies that get involved. But in general, as you're describing,
Okay.
that'd be correct.
And water too, of course, water. permits.
Always,
Okay, thanks.
of course.
Sandy?
No comment.
Great, thanks, Levi. Why don't we open up to public comment? Anybody in the chambers have a comment?
Good afternoon. Monique Caldy. I just wanted to bring something to your attention. I was speaking with residents in the downtown area over the weekend, and their concern is that they're already so dense that they don't have parking to access to their own homes. And one of the requirements in here that I see, and forgive me because I've not taken out a measure, but it does say that residential buildings and an off-site parking facility, provided that the off-site facility is within 1,000 feet of the building entrance. My concern is the impact on the residents between Figueroa and Camino al Estero, because they are pretty far from those public parking structures. And as they lose their parking, then where do they go? And how do they transport their groceries or transport their little ones to home? So we need to really look at what the impact is of making that denser and taking away their parking options. So I'd like for you to please consider that in all of the data. Thank you.
Can you say your name again for the record?
Monique Caldy.
Okay.
I'm running for mayor.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Erica, anybody online?
Excuse me. Yes, there's one hand raised. Land Watch. I'll go ahead and allow them to speak.
Please, thank you.
My name is Laura Davis. I'm the Deputy Director of Land Watch, and I will be providing comments on Land Watch's behalf. We support the staff recommendation and encourage the Planning Commission to adopt a resolution recommending that the City Council amend the downtown specific plan to eliminate the minimum parking requirements for residential land uses. Parking requirements increase development costs, making residential construction even less likely to pencil out and making housing even less affordable. Mandating the provision of parking for residential development encourages auto dependence and increases greenhouse gas emissions. We encourage the Planning Commission to take action in support of what our community needs, which is a greater supply of affordable, walkable infill housing for people who work here. Removal of minimum parking requirements for residential development is an important step in realizing this objective. Thank you for considering our comments and for your work toward a more sustainable and equitable approach to housing.
Thank you. Anything else? No one else online, Erica?
I see no other hands raised.
Great, let's pull it back. Any
I'll just,
comments here?
excuse me, Chair. I just wanted to know, I did a quick search in reference to Commissioner Fletcher's question on bicycle parking. It's actually not clear how in the downtown specific plan bicycle parking is calculated. In the code, it's pretty clear. It's a percentage of the automobile parking. So I'm going to just take note of that and look at how we can address the requirement for bike parking prior to it going forward to council. Thank you.
Thanks. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, I guess I'm generally in support of it. My fear is that the parking issue always seems like we're 10 to 20 years ahead of reality with this stuff. As far as, everybody's going to have more bikes, there's going to be less demand, and there is a lag time that exists between the reality of people and their ownership of cars and their need to store them, and the zoning. It just exists, and it's hard to deny that exists, and the idea of people coming home and having to park 4 blocks away with their groceries or their kids, it's really tough. And what I'm doing, I'm just sort of speaking the dilemma here, and the other part of it for me is that as the recent caller said, the affordability issue is so key to housing. It's like, it's so expensive to build stuff. Something's got to shake. And I'm tending towards supporting this item for that reason. It's just the affordability is just killing everything. What can we do if we can't afford to build units? You know, I think it's almost like an inverse of the if you build, they will come. It's almost like if you don't build, they're still going to come. You know, I think that's the supposition of this whole parking idea. So the city is being quite progressive, you know, trying to jump the gun on this. And it is basically for an affordability and equity kind of a rationale.
And I think Levi can correct me if I'm wrong, but it supports our housing. To try to get increased numbers to meet our over 3,500 foot requirement from the state.
The way I interpret this is that it doesn't necessarily reduce parking. It doesn't do that at all. What it does is eliminate a governmental requirement that you have a certain amount of parking. A private developer can still put in market-driven parking according to how they feel that the project's going to sell, but it doesn't say that you can't have parking.
Right. It doesn't say
Yep.
you can't. That's right.
Just you need to make it available.
Your Honor.
Yes, please.
Years ago, we met a guy on Alvarado who was looking a little panicked, you know, they're walking up and down. And he was living in the OCO. I guess they're rental apartments. And he had a car. He was frantically trying to figure out where to put the car. And, you know, I think we're going to see a lot of that. I have two cars and I never drive one of them. So what do you do? If I had to move to a place that had no garage, I'd have to invent a garage. You know, and so that's the kind of thing we see. And on top of all that, there's a state law that says this is the way it's going to be, guys. And not that I love state laws or anything, but I think that's part of the dilemma, as Terry calls it, that we're in here. I'm going to support the motion.
There hasn't been a motion yet.
I'd like to make a motion.
But Mike has a question, statement.
I agree basically with what Terry said. This is one of those situations where you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. People, even in the city, has forecasted for the last decade that parking is going to be a major issue in the city of Monterey. Anybody that's parked in San Francisco or in San Jose knows that's the reality that we're going to see. But with the state pushing it, and I would say the local conditions are pushing for us to make cuts in cost to sustain adding residential capabilities. I don't see a way around it. And I will, I think, objectively outline to people that we're all going to bicycles is not true. The state of California has a constant increase in cars a year, not a decrease. An increase, even with over 1 million people moving out. So I just don't see a way around, and I'm sustaining the proposition here. Thank you.
Mike, anything else?
I think I gave my
Your 2 cents.
speech.
Anybody have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we recommend that the downtown specific plan be adopted to reduce the minimum parking.
I'll
Send this
second that.
Council.
Erica, could you do a roll call for us?
Sure. Chair Bluth,
Aye.
Vice Chair Silva,
Aye.
Commissioner Brassfield,
Aye.
Commissioner Dawson,
Yes.
Commissioner Fletcher,
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes,
and Commissioner Latassa.
Yes.
Okay, that motion carries unanimously.
I think it's to eliminate the minimum requirement.
What did I say?
Reduce.
Oh, yeah, can we just correct the language in the motion?
I'm sorry, the motion was to,
I mistakenly said to reduce the minimum parking, but the actual wording here is to eliminate.
okay, noted.
Noted. Thank you.
Thanks. Any commissioner comments?
I'd comment on the Festa Italia, which was just grand, but probably not our purview.
That's a good comment.
I'd like to note that everybody on that side of the podium says aye, and everybody on this side says yes. There's a great divide right through the chair.
Probably mix it up next time. Levi, do you have anything for us?
Yes, thank you. So currently there's no items tentatively scheduled for our September 24th Planning Commission meeting, but if that changes, I'll be sure to let you all know. I did want to give just a brief update on our housing element and where we stand on that. So as you all know, it was adopted by the city and has been resubmitted to the state Department of Housing and Community Development with the revisions from City Council. And we're still awaiting their comment and or certification. So we eagerly await that. They owe us some, they have a 60-day mandated timeframe in which they have to give us some response, and that's due back in mid-October. So we're eagerly awaiting. However, we do have a state mandated timeframe to implement some or a portion of our housing action plan that requires our rezonings to accommodate for our arena to be completed by the end of the year. And that is our statutory deadline. So with that in mind, we are still working, moving forward on implementation of our housing element with the hopes that it will be certified by the state in the interim there. So just wanted to update you on that and let you know that we expect some of those items to be coming for the Planning Commission in November. So pretty exciting stuff for moving along and putting it into practice. So just want to give you an update on that, and that's all we have.
A quick question, did those people appeal the use permit to the city council from that historic property?
There were no appeals filed on that item. So no.
Well, maybe they recognize that they could just move them to local.
I believe that is the plan. They plan on relocating one of the accessory structures and then trimming off a portion of the other one to meet the setbacks.
I have a question.
Anyway.
When we don't have anything scheduled in the Marine Corps, they used to call those training opportunities.
Oh, no.
One of the things that we were required to do is have a back pocket lesson plan. That means that you research the topic and you're prepared to give a presentation on what training that will be. Can we do some of that?
Are you volunteering to lead a training?
No.
Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry.
Without the push-ups.
The way they have to push it, but we keep bringing up topics that we'd like to discuss. I know Terry has always had saltwater coming into the Lake El Estero issue.
Sea level rise, Mark.
I'm just pointing out that those are what we could call training opportunities. And you've been working on some of them, so I don't know when they're going to come to fruition, but could we do some of that?
Absolutely. I think the 24th will be a little too quick of a turnaround for me to put something together, but I'll work. I know we've been talking about doing Brown Act training, and I think it's due time for a refresher on that. So let me circle back with the city attorney's office and see. I do think we can probably accommodate that before the end of the calendar year, and I think that would be beneficial for the group.
Thank you, sir. Of
course.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to compliment the staff on the housing element. It was really such an ambitious schedule, and you've managed to keep with it. And it was a huge amount of work, and that was a job well done.
We appreciate that. It's definitely a very collaborative team effort for the whole planning division and the community development department. So we definitely appreciate hearing that. The job's not over yet, but we're committed to seeing it through. So thank you.
Great. Well, thanks, everyone. Let's adjourn at a little bit after 5:30.